4 tons of twisted metal are screaming through the freezing darkness of deep space at 5,000 miles per hour. Scientists on Earth watch their computer monitors in complete silence as the runaway object slams directly into the far side of the moon. Nobody can see the flash from ground telescopes, but months later, satellite images make experts freeze in absolute disbelief. They expected to find one single impact crater in the gray lunar dirt, but they found 2. If you love exploring real cosmic mysteries using clear scientific facts instead of clickbait rumors, hit that subscribe button right now. We break down the strange reality of our universe step by step every single week, and subscribing ensures you will never miss a major discovery from deep space. To understand how a massive piece of floating human garbage ended up digging 2 unexpected holes into the lunar soil, we have to travel back to a quiet office on Earth in early 2022. A veteran space researcher named Bill Gray was sitting at his computer running routine checks on his astronomical tracking software. Bill is not a typical astronomer who spends every night looking through a giant glass telescope in a high mountain observatory. Instead, he spends his days writing specialized computer code designed to track floating space rocks, distant comets, and near-Earth asteroids. His custom software scans public light measurements from telescopes across the globe to project exactly where objects in space will travel in the coming months. On a cold morning in late January, Bill received an unexpected error message from his computer system. The software was attempting to calculate the future orbital line of a specific dark object drifting through deep space, but the projected path suddenly stopped dead on the date of March 4th, 2022. At first, Bill assumed there was a simple bug in his source code or a temporary glitch in his orbital database, but when he manually forced the software to display the exact coordinates of the object on that specific morning, the startling truth became immediately clear. The calculated path did not extend past March 4th because the trajectory ended directly inside the solid surface of the moon. The mathematical data showed a heavy metallic cylinder speeding through the airless void at more than 7 times the speed of a high-powered bullet. Bill knew right away that this moving object was not a natural rock coming from the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Natural space rocks move across space at very specific velocity ranges and reflect sunlight in a steady, uniform manner. This mystery object was tumbling wildly through space, reflecting uneven flashes of sunlight every few minutes as its flat metallic sides rotated toward the sun. It was clearly a piece of man-made space hardware that had been abandoned in deep space many years prior. Bill began digging through historical space records and rocket launch archives to determine where this 4-ton metallic cylinder originally came from. He traced the calculated orbit backward through time, step by step, until his calculations aligned with a major space launch from February 2015. On that afternoon, a private space company named SpaceX had launched a powerful Falcon 9 rocket from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The primary goal of that mission was to lift an advanced government climate satellite named the Deep Space Climate Observatory, often called DSCOVR for short, into a specialized orbit far beyond Earth. The weather satellite needed to reach a unique gravitational balance point located 1 million miles away from Earth, directly positioned between our planet and the Sun. To push the heavy satellite across such an enormous distance, the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket had to burn every single drop of its liquid propellant during its primary burn. The lower stage of the rocket detached and fell back into Earth's atmosphere as planned, but the long upper booster stage had to fire its single engine at maximum thrust to achieve the necessary speed for the deep space transfer. Once the weather satellite was safely pushed onto its long journey toward its destination, the empty rocket booster was disconnected and cast adrift. It had completely drained its fuel tanks and possessed no remaining gas for a controlled deorbit burn, meaning it could not steer itself back toward Earth to burn up safely in our thick atmosphere. Instead, it was left floating in a vast, uncontrolled orbit that looped unpredictably between the Earth and the Moon. For 7 long years, the 4-ton metal cylinder drifted silently through the freezing vacuum of space without anyone actively monitoring its position. The intense gravity of the Sun pulled on the abandoned cylinder from one direction, while the gravity of the Earth and the Moon tugged on it from other directions. This continuous 3-way gravitational tug-of-war slowly distorted the shape of its path over the years, transforming a simple orbital loop into a wild, unpredictable spiral. Neither NASA nor any private organization kept daily tracking tabs on the spent booster, because deep space was assumed to be vast enough that abandoned rocket stages would simply float harmlessly forever without colliding with anything important. Have you ever wondered how many forgotten pieces of human space junk are currently drifting invisible in deep space right now? Drop a quick comment below with your guess, and hit the like button if you want more people to learn about the hidden clutter floating through our solar system. When news of Bill Gray's trajectory calculation was published across international media outlets in early 2022, major news networks picked up the story within hours. Front-page headlines around the globe announced that a rogue SpaceX rocket was on a doomed collision course with the Moon. People everywhere were fascinated and alarmed because this was set to be the very first recorded time that an accidental piece of private commercial space trash would slam into the lunar surface. Environmental activists and space enthusiasts began raising sharp questions about whether commercial space companies should be allowed to leave giant steel structures drifting endlessly through cislunar space. While the general public debated space pollution, planetary scientists and astronomers were actually thrilled by the prospect of the upcoming crash. The moon does not possess a thick protective atmosphere like Earth, which means objects traveling through space never slow down or burn up due to air friction before hitting the soil. Every stray rock or piece of hardware strikes the rock-hard surface at maximum velocity, blasting apart the topsoil and digging deep into the underlying crustal material. Researchers realized that a 4-ton metallic rocket hitting the lunar dust at over 5,000 miles per hour would provide a rare scientific opportunity to study how high-energy impacts reshape planetary surfaces. Observatories around the globe pointed their powerful optical telescopes toward the sky to refine the orbital measurements and lock down the exact impact location. Orbital mechanics experts calculated that the high-speed collision would occur in a quiet region on the far side of the moon, near a massive geological feature known as Hertzsprung crater. Because the crash was going to take place on the far side of the moon, observers on Earth would not be able to watch the event happen live using ground-based telescopes. However, space agencies began planning to use camera satellites currently orbiting the moon to capture detailed images of the fresh crash site after the debris settled. Every scientist in the space community agreed on what the impact site ought to look like based on established physics and previous lunar collisions. They expected the hollow 45-foot aluminum booster stage to hit the lunar ground, like a heavy metallic dart falling from the sky. Standard spent rocket boosters consist mostly of large, empty aluminum propellant tanks with a very heavy, dense rocket engine assembly mounted at the bottom base. Because almost all of the structural weight is concentrated at the bottom engine end, standard physics dictates that the heavy engine end strikes the ground first, creating one single circular crater roughly 20 meters wide. Then, just 2 weeks before the predicted impact date of March 4th, an unexpected email arrived in Bill Gray's inbox that completely upended the global narrative. The detailed message came from Jon Giorgini, a senior navigation engineer working at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. John had been reviewing the official trajectory data of the original weather satellite that SpaceX launched back in 2015, and he noticed a critical orbital discrepancy that everyone else in the astronomical community had somehow overlooked. John pointed out that the actual flight trajectory of the weather satellite and the recorded orbit of the Mystery Space Cylinder did not match up when calculated backward. When SpaceX launched the satellite in 2015, the upper rocket booster had vented its remaining fuel in a directional angle that pushed it into a totally different orbital plane, far away from where the moon would be in March 2022. The mathematical tracking numbers simply did not align. The 4-ton piece of metallic junk heading toward the lunar surface was definitely not a SpaceX rocket. Did you know that deep space object trackers can sometimes mistake one giant piece of floating space trash for another because they both look like faint blinking dots of light? Tell us in the comments if that surprises you, and make sure to subscribe so you stay updated as this cosmic investigation unfolds. Bill Gray immediately realized he needed to reevaluate his entire orbital archive from scratch. He spent long nights digging through historic launch data from every spacefaring country, searching for any major rocket launch from that era that had sent a payload toward the moon. He carefully analyzed dozens of candidate missions, comparing their post-launch trajectories against the recorded path of the mystery object. Eventually, after reviewing years of archived satellite tracking logs, his attention locked onto a forgotten space launch from October 2014. That launch was a Chinese Space Agency test mission designated as Chang'e 5 at T1. It was an experimental robotic spacecraft dispatched to fly around the moon and test a small re-entry capsule before China attempted its historic mission to collect real soil samples from the lunar surface and return them to Earth. The mission utilized a massive Long March 3C rocket to lift off from the Xichang Satellite Launch Center. The test payload successfully completed its looping trajectory around the far side of the moon and returned its capsule to Earth. But the heavy booster stage of the rocket was left behind in a high Earth-Moon transfer orbit. Bill traced the mathematical path of that Chinese rocket booster backward across 7 years of complex orbital maneuvers and gravitational flybys. Every single mathematical point on the orbital graph matched the current trajectory of the mystery object, with total precision. The light reflection properties of the object, its tumbling rotation speed, and its overall size matched the Long March 3C upper stage, not the SpaceX Falcon 9 booster. The object speeding toward its final doom on the lunar surface was actually an abandoned booster from a Chinese lunar test mission that had been floating forgotten in deep space. When international astronomers published this corrected finding to the public, official press representatives from China publicly denied the connection. During a routine foreign ministry briefing, Government officials stated that the booster stage from their 2014 test mission had safely re-entered Earth's atmosphere long ago and completely burned up over the ocean shortly after its launch. However, independent space tracking experts and United States Space Command analysts reviewed their tracking logs again and confirmed that official representatives were confusing two separate rocket launches that shared similar mission names. The countdown toward the scheduled impact on March 4, 2022 continued without interruption. The absolute laws of orbital gravity do not care who manufactured a piece of metal or which nation claims ownership of drifting space debris. At approximately 7 minutes past 7 in the morning Eastern Time, the 4-ton metallic booster struck the dry, powdery regolith of the far side of the moon at a staggering speed of 5,400 miles per hour. The tremendous kinetic energy released upon impact was equivalent to detonating nearly 3 tons of high explosives inside a single spot. Millions of tiny glass fragments and pulverized rock particles were blasted miles upward into the airless space above the lunar surface. Because the crash took place on the hidden hemisphere of the moon, no human eye or Earth-based telescope witnessed the immediate flash of the impact. Planetary researchers had to wait patiently for orbital mapping satellites circling the moon to pass directly over the calculated crash coordinates and transmit visual images back to Earth. Were you aware that the moon takes the exact same amount of time to rotate on its axis as it does to orbit Earth, which is why humanity only ever sees one side of it from our planet? Comment your thoughts below on how mysterious the far side of the moon remains, and share this video with a friend who loves deep space puzzles. In late May 2022, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a high-resolution camera satellite that has been mapping the lunar terrain for over a decade, finally flew over the predicted impact site. Image processing specialists at Arizona State University retrieved the fresh visual data and carefully compared pre-impact photos of the flat terrain against the newly acquired images. When the processed high-contrast pictures materialized on their computer monitors, the research team fell into total silence. Every single recorded rocket impact in human history had left one distinct, uniform circular crater on the surface of the moon. During the famous Apollo program in the late 1960s and early 1970s, NASA deliberately crashed several spent Saturn V upper rocket stages into the moon to generate artificial seismic waves that could be measured by instruments left on the ground by astronauts. Every single one of those massive rocket crashes carved out a single, clean, circular crater surrounded by a symmetric blanket of blasted soil. However, the fresh satellite images of the March 2022 crash site revealed something that completely defied standard physics models. Instead of one single round crater, there were two distinct craters overlapping each other in the dry gray soil. On the eastern side sat a crater measuring roughly 18 meters across, and overlapping its western edge was a second distinct crater measuring roughly 16 meters across. Together, they formed an unusual double crater structure that looked like a giant figure 8 pressed firmly into the lunar soil. Mark Robinson, the lead scientist overseeing the orbiter's camera system, publicly explained why this double crater came as such a shocking revelation to the global scientific community. To form two separate, distinct craters side by side during a single impact event, a crashing rocket cannot simply be a hollow metal tube with a single engine mounted at one end. They must have had two large concentrated heavy masses located at opposite ends of its primary body structure. If the top end of the rocket stage had been a standard empty aluminum fuel tank, it would have crumpled instantly like a discarded drink can upon touching the surface, lacking the necessary dense mass to blast out a second 16-meter crater in solid rock. The physical existence of the double crater proved beyond any scientific doubt that whatever struck the moon possessed a massive, heavy payload mounted firmly to the front tip of the booster, as well as the heavy rocket engine mounted at the rear. Scientific calculations indicated that whatever object was attached to the front tip of that booster stage must have weighed hundreds of pounds to possess enough kinetic force to blast out a crater of that magnitude. Yet, according to official international space manifests and public engineering schematics, the Chinese booster stage carried no extra heavy equipment or heavy structural balance weights at its front tip once its primary test capsule was deployed. To this day, independent planetary researchers and aerospace experts around the world are left asking a major question. What secret heavy payload was mounted to the front tip of that rocket booster? Was it an unannounced military surveillance experiment, a specialized structural counterweight, or an unrecorded piece of secret space hardware that was never disclosed to the international scientific community? The agency that launched the rocket has never offered an official technical explanation, leaving the origin of the second crater as one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries in modern spaceflight. What do you think was secretly attached to the front of that mystery rocket stage before it blasted into space? Type your wildest theories in the comments section right now, and hit the like button if you want us to cover more secret space discoveries. While the exact nature of that secret front weight remains shrouded in silence, the dramatic crash itself highlights a critical modern issue that is developing right now in real time. For decades, spacefaring nations treated the vast void between the Earth and the Moon as an infinite empty oceanic zone where spent rocket stages could be abandoned without long-term consequences. But today, cislunar space is rapidly becoming one of the most active and crowded operational regions in our entire solar system. Nations and private aerospace corporations across the world are launching dozens of new robotic landers, communication satellites, and deep space probes toward the Moon every single year. Modern lunar landers, satellite constellations, and planned crewed space stations are being placed into orbital corridors that directly intersect with old, unmapped space junk drifting through the Earth-Moon system. Unlike low Earth orbit, where atmospheric drag slowly pulls trash downward until it burns up harmlessly, debris trapped in high cislunar orbits can drift in chaotic, unpredictable paths for centuries. These unguided, multi-ton pieces of metal act like silent sea mines, floating invisible in deep space. Because they travel at thousands of miles per hour relative to active satellites, even a small stray bolt, detached solar panel, or empty propellant tank can instantly destroy an advanced scientific spacecraft or pose a deadly threat to future human crews traveling toward lunar outposts. The 2022 moon crash served as a loud warning that human orbital waste is already impacting alien worlds in ways we cannot completely predict or control. Right now, military tracking agencies and civil space organizations are scrambling to design advanced deep space radar arrays and optical monitoring networks capable of tracking space debris far beyond geostationary orbit. Until recently, tracking systems focused almost entirely on monitoring active satellites orbiting close to Earth's atmosphere. But as humanity prepares to build permanent habitats and research bases on the lunar surface, knowing the precise, real-time location of every drifting booster stage has become an essential requirement for international space safety. To understand why keeping track of these rogue objects is so difficult, you have to realize how dark and empty deep space truly is. When a rocket stage finishes its job, its electrical batteries die completely within a few hours. The radios stop broadcasting signal beeps, the thrusters freeze cold, and the entire metal vessel becomes a silent, dark ghost drifting through an ocean of shadow. Optical telescopes on Earth can only spot these dead cylinders when sunlight strikes their metal skin at just the right angle against the pitch-black backdrop of deep space. If a drifting rocket stage enters a wide orbit that takes it far beyond the Moon, it becomes nearly impossible to track with standard ground-based optical systems. Scientists have to rely on complex mathematical simulations to predict where gravitational forces will push the object months or years into the future. But small solar radiation pressure, where light particles from the sun gently push against the metallic surface, constantly nudges the trajectory in ways that computers cannot perfectly predict over long spans of time. This unpredictability creates massive blind spots in our orbital map of the Earth-Moon system. Engineers call this region cislunar space, and it spans a sphere of influence over 240,000 miles wide. Right now, there are estimated to be dozens of spent upper rocket stages from past moon missions, interplanetary probes, and solar research satellites drifting unmonitored through this vast boundary zone. Each one represents a 4-ton kinetic projectile capable of causing catastrophic destruction if it crosses paths with an active crew capsule or orbital space station. Imagine a future where commercial passenger ships are regularly traveling back and forth between Earth and the Moon, carrying scientists, mining engineers, and construction crews. A single unmapped rocket booster drifting blindly across commercial space lanes could turn a routine flight into an unthinkable tragedy in a fraction of a second. That is why space safety agencies are insisting that every future rocket launch must include mandatory self-disposing engines or solar sails designed to pull spent boosters safely down onto the Moon or push them completely out of the Earth-Moon system into solar orbit. Do you think governments around the world should force private companies and military space programs to clean up their space trash before launching new lunar missions? Share your thoughts in the comment section below and hit the like button if you believe space safety should be a top priority for every country. The incredible story of the mystery rocket slamming into the Moon reflects a profound truth about the ongoing future of human space exploration. Our relentless curiosity has given us the amazing technological capability to travel across the vast void of space and leave our mark on distant worlds. But with that incredible power comes a heavy responsibility. The Moon has remained largely undisturbed for over 4 billion years, keeping an ancient record of cosmic history written cleanly in its silent dirt. As we take our next major leaps into the cosmos, we must decide whether we will preserve these ancient worlds or allow our orbital garbage to rewrite their landscapes before we even arrive. Every crater on the Moon tells a story that stretches back to the very dawn of our solar system, long before life ever appeared on Earth. When natural meteorites hit the lunar surface, they bring primordial minerals and cosmic ice that help scientists piece together how planets were born. But when human space junk slams into the soil, It leaves behind artificial alloys, toxic chemicals, and unnatural structural signatures that can confuse future scientific research. Preserving the natural lunar environment is not just an aesthetic idea, it is a crucial scientific necessity for preserving the history of our solar system. As we look toward the future, the double crater left behind on March 4, 2022, stands as an everlasting monument to the dawn of a new era in human spaceflight. It marks the precise historical moment when human space junk became a permanent geological force on another world without human intention or control. The two overlapping holes on the far side of the moon will remain untouched for millions of years, waiting silently as human technology evolves and future generations travel to the lunar surface to read the story written in the dust. If this real-life space investigation helped you look at lunar exploration in a whole new way, please take a quick moment to support our work. Hit that subscribe button right now, click the notification bell so you never miss our weekly space stories, leave a comment telling us your opinion on who should clean up space junk, and share this video with someone who loves deep space mysteries. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next story.